getting misty already there, Representative?
I am. It's making Dan's testimony is making me cry right now.
Okay.
This one's not bad. I got some other stuff that make it.
He's just bringing in that human services energy. All right, good afternoon, Representative Noyes. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much, Chair Byron. Thanks for having me here today.
Yes. And I think you're familiar with everyone in the room. Do you need a round robin?
Sure. Some new faces here. I know some of
All
them.
right, we'll run the gauntlet then. Representative Matt Byron, Addison 3. You already know me.
Representative Lisa Hango, Franklin 5, nice to see you, Dana.
Representative Lucy Burden, Cambridge and Monroe.
Sandy Pincinel, Bennington, Rutland 1, DMB, Dorset, Mount Tabor, William Grove, Group.
Regular committee Morton, regular committee man, Morgan, I should say. Grand Isle Chittenden District, and we know each other.
Yoke Uppen, Windsor 2, Cavendish, Weathersfield, Baltimore.
Wow. Representative Mary Catherine Stowe, Burlington.
That was me. Like I am.
Shea Waters, Evans, Charlotte Heightsburg.
Awesome.
All right, you are here to tell us about H240.
Sure. All right. Want me to start? So I'm Dan Noyes, represent Wolcott, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere, serve on the Human Services Committee. Earlier this year, I was in a meeting with our Morrisville Water and Light, and we were talking about the use of dams in Lamoille County, thinking about the flooding that we've had in Johnson and Cambridge and Wolcott. He was telling me that he was not allowed to draw the Green River Reservoir down because it's in violation of the ANR regulations that they have, the policy that they have on the dam. And, you know, you think about Green River Reservoir, it's up, goes from Hyde Park up into Eden, downstream. You got Morrisville, Hyde Park, Johnson, that keeps flooding, Cambridge floods. You know, maybe there's an opportunity to allow the governor to direct Morrisville Water and Light in consultation with the Agency of Natural Resources in the event they can see a storm coming, a hurricane coming up the coast, to start drawing down the reservoir. If we could take 6 inches of water out of Johnson, we'd save an awful lot. And Green Reservoir is not going to hold back. Like, we're not going to just like hold back feet of water, but maybe we could take just enough off so that we don't have people's houses flooded again. Now, it's discretionary for ANR to you know, go after Morrisville Water and Light for drawing down. But is that the way to, you know, basically run our government around, you know, preparing for a flood? You know, to say, okay, yeah, it's illegal, but you can just do it anyways. The idea that I've proposed here is to say, look, the governor has the ability to work with the Secretary of ANR to draw down reservoirs in the event of an impending flood so that there's some holdback, and to do it, you know, with oversight, to do it with some thought, not just say like, okay, we're just gonna draw it down. But it takes time. You can't just like take the Green Reservoir and drop it down a couple of feet. It's huge, you know, so you've got to kind of plan in advance and then, you know, let it fill back up. So that's kind of where I am with this bill. As I said, I met with Scott Johnstone from Morrisville Water and Light, who was like, this would be really helpful for our community.
So within your community's lens, obviously it was a Green River Reservoir, but this was broadly to like any.
Sure. I mean, we've got Wrightsville right here, and dumps down into the north branch of the Winooski, right into Montpelier. Sure, there's many other impoundments that in the event of an impending hurricane, flood, you know, what you know is coming up, can you drop it down and then hold some water back?
So if I recall correctly, I think it was Wrightsville's North Branch, right? So was it the 2023 flood where that one, they actually had concerns about it breaching and or
Yes.
cresting, right?
Wrightsville.
But it was too far along in the event for the release was a questionable decision because of the elevated water levels downriver, if I recall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this would in theory, application theoretically, give everybody the authority to say, look, we've got this big weather event coming, some ground saturation measurements and the account various measurements. And then be like, okay, we're gonna drop it by X to help mitigate this issue in anticipation of this and help preserve the
Yep.
safety and sanctity of some downtown corridors.
Mhm.
What was it come out of the dam safety report?
I don't know.
Yeah, I remember that this committee was one of the committees in jurisdiction that got a dam safety assessment after this scenarios. that we
Right.
were discussing. And I know that we had some conversations as a committee about, you know, kind of some input and stuff. Should there be more concern over the moving forward? So that's one of the things that grabbed my eye when I saw this
Mhm.
was in correlation.
Sure.
Representative Scott.
So by releasing the dams, I'm just trying to visualize this in my head. So by releasing the dams downstream, then it allows the dam to hold back water without tapping or flooding
Yes.
because of the floodwaters.
I think of that, of course, it's just like all super theoretical conversation, right? But it's sort of like they'll evaluate the level of the reservoir, other factors to make sure they're not pushing water down into something that's already saturated with flood. But in order to like maintain the integrity of the dam and or like the downstream flow of water in these like extreme weather events, a way of trying to just sort of control it because the Wrightsville one we were referring to, there was a lot of nervous energy around that thing for probably 15, 20 hours.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of updates on that dam. Representative Coffin.
Yeah, just, it's more curiosity. We were talking significant weather events, so if they're gonna draw down, like the dam you were talking about, 6
Mhm.
inches, how long of a lead time, have there been any studies, how long a lead time would it take to draw that down?
Good question. You know, we look at forecasts, you know, 8, 10 days out, whatever. I mean, you could at least start to draw it down. You could have that conversation about, you know, how much could you draw down and then obviously stop once the rain starts. So, no, there hasn't been anything that I've heard. And I'm sure they have plenty of data on, you know, like, you know, they've been operating Green Reservoir since in the 40s. So they probably know how much water they can put down the Green River into the Lamoille and what that does to the water level in the reservoir.
Okay, thank you, I just
Yeah,
'Cause I
no,
was
it's a good question.
curious, and the other
Yeah.
part of that was, and this would make sure that, because I didn't see language in it, and I know it would be important to where the water is flowing down, if it's hitting another reservoir, another dam, that they would all have to coordinate.
Right, and that's why I've involved like the agency of natural resources and the governor, you know, so that there is communication. So that, you know, you can really think about preparing for an impending storm. And as you know, you could draw it down and you could have a miss.
Yeah.
Which is always good too,
Mhm.
especially if you're from the town of Johnson or Cambridge.
Representative Hoover.
Thank you.
Any difference in the schedules between pure reservoirs and reservoirs that are hydro generated?
So what I'm really thinking about with this legislation is, you know, they have permits for where they have to keep the reservoir, what level. And they can't, like, for instance, Green River, they can't draw down in the event of a storm coming. And, you know, this just allows that to happen, gives the framework. And, you know, this is an idea of what that framework would look like, you know, others that could be involved, you know, would be open for discussion for sure to make sure that it's done in some sort of an organized manner.
Thank you.
Representative Pisnell.
Does this give the power to the governor to make that decision?
Yes.
Excuse me, or does he have to consult with the Secretary of Natural Resources? And if he says, the Natural Secretary says, no, I don't think we need to do it, I mean, does it still give the governor the power?
I think that's a deeper I think that's a deeper question. Should we take this up? But I mean, this basically in my, what I've run through, it seems the decision and the information gathering to guide the trips is in coordination with the state agencies, natural resources. But under an emergency power,
You could just make the decision, say
the
do it.
ultimate decision, I believe, really falls on the executive.
Mhm.
And this is something, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is just in light of the situations that I referenced. There was a really extensive report done on our dams throughout the state. And then when we start taking up the flood response bills and emergency response bills, this is one of the pieces I think the committee should consider for inclusion in that conversation. But that's why.
So the instant fact, I think it was Sandy or Irene, when Rotman's Reservoir let loose.
Yeah.
And ended up killing the
Municipal
manager,
worker.
the municipal worker and his son. Had this been authorized, they could have drawn down that water perhaps. And not
Perhaps, yeah.
Had it take over, okay.
Yeah, and that's like a level of detail. Something we can ask a lot more of those granular questions, but there are, in light of Irene, Sandy, the flooding of 2023 and 2024,
Yeah,
it's not, these aren't one-offs, these are patterns now. So I think it's a reasonable thing for us to do is to start looking at some of these measures to give government the authority to address them in a more expedient manner than they have.
do we know how many dams there are?
That would be a great question to refer to at the dam safety bill or the dam safety report. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot more than you'd think because
Yeah.
there's some that are very active, maintained, something like Green River, for example, which is also a major recreation area, camping, boating. And then you've got these sort of like old, should be decommissioned ones like barn that are just like rusting in woods.
Over
Places.
Jets has one, do they not?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I got
that's
a
why I could-
waterfall. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been camping near there and we've gone and looked at that last year when it was, the waters were way up over the.
Mhm. Yeah, and there are, that would be an interesting thing to look into with that, because that definitely did an assessment on everything that the state has in its known inventory.
Perfect.
All right,
Anything else from the representative from Walton? No?
all right. Thank you so much. Have a great
Sir.
afternoon.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
See you soon.
So I guess we'll dog ear that one for some further discussion once we get to our emergency response work. Is that agreeable?
Yep.
All right. New member from Barry.
Steady.
City, yes, thank you for the clarification. Me and my unrefined statements.
If there wasn't a difference, I wouldn't put it up.
Don't make us merge you.
This is a Dylan's
Sorry.
rule.
Whew,
Sorry.
diving right in, aren't we?
I kid because I care.
Gotta have fun.
How are you, sir? I guess we did it for Representative Noyes, we'll do it for you as well. We'll do a quick round robin. Representative Byron, Addison 3. Chair of the committee.
Representative Lisa Hago, Franklin 5, Vice Chair.
Representative Lucy Boyden, Memorial 3, Cambridge, Ohio.
Representative Pincinel, Bennington, Rutland 1, DMV, Dorset, Mount Tabor, Peru, and Land Grove.
Michael Morgan, Grand Isle, Chittenden District, which is Albert, North Bureau, Islamont, Grand Isle, South Bureau, and Milton.
Tom Hooper, Berlin.
Leo Goffin, Windsor 2, Cavendish, Weathersfield, Baltimore.
Mary Catherine Stone, Burlington.
Philip J. Hooper, Brookfield, Braintree, Randolph, Granville, and Roxbury.
Nugent, so Burlington.
Shay Waters Evans, Charlotte, and Heinsberg.
And Edward Charles Wazazak III of Berry City, for being fancy today. Uh,
I don't.
Said that.
Challenge accepted.
Yes, guys.
We can duke it out later. All right, so thank you for having me in today to talk about H232. And before I start, I just want to make a quick clarification that, as the chair alluded to earlier, we'll be chatting a lot about flood recovery, and I'll be in here a lot over the next few weeks for the flood omnibus bill, which is in all of your inboxes and you should sponsor it because it's a great bill. This is not reflective of the flood caucus or part of the flood omnibus bill. This is a Representative Watts Act bill. So I just want to make that distinction. I'm not speaking on behalf of the flood caucus. This is just me. So this bill proposes the creation of a Vermont Municipal Response and Recovery Special Fund. The thought and the intent of this bill is to, over the course of the past 2 years, I served on the Barre City Council throughout both of the 23 and 24 floods and have talked with a lot of my municipal colleagues across the state. And one of the main barriers that has been identified by municipal officials is the amount of applications in different funds that exist for various flood resiliency projects, as well as the challenge of navigating the legislative process over to advocate for flood recovery money and flood recovery projects. This creates inequities between some of our more rural communities and places like the city of Barre that has around 100 full-time municipal staff. We have the capacity to hire a lobbyist to advocate for us throughout the legislative session. Some of our more rural communities, our smaller towns, do not have those resources. And it creates an inequity wherein every year we have to assume that we're going to keep flooding, even though I hope it's not every year, but we're going to continue to have these events occur while we're working on the overall restructuring of our waterways and how we deal with flood events in the state of Vermont. The intent of this fund is to create basically a one-stop shop where municipalities can go to access flood recovery resources. So rather than having to apply to 3 different special funds or 3 different grants or whatever it is, whether you're trying to do infrastructure, whether you're trying to do engineering planning, or whether you just need, basic operating expenses to get you through until FEMA reimbursements are coming, have one fund established that municipalities can access. So I've talked to the state treasurer's office, and that's the second section of the bill, is requiring the state treasurer to bring a report back on potential uses and structures for this fund. This is to help simplify the access that municipalities would have to aid. And right now the legislature has to take up valuable time every year arguing over what specific help can be offered to which specific communities in the aftermath of a flood event. And the goal of this bill would be to simplify all of that, create one pot of money. And so the legislature in the future years would simply have to decide how much money we could afford to give to flood resiliency and flood recovery projects, rather than having to go through the entire legislative process for every flood recovery project every year. So that's the idea. That's the general gist of the bill that you have in front of you.
So in anticipation of the other consideration, are there, and I don't want to get out of the skis and speak to another thing, but they're all right.
Yeah.
Is there a mechanism in there that's similar to this, or is this something that is theoretically should be included in that conversation for consideration, in your humble opinion?
Yeah, in my opinion, this is the direction that the legislature should move when talking about flood recovery and resiliency in the future. So again, this is not an idea from the Flood Caucus. This is just an idea from me. But I think that, when we start talking about the other pieces of flood legislation that are going to come forward, there's a lot, everything for like VTrans, ANR, VEM. There are a lot of people and a lot of different agencies that have a role to play. And I think the more that we can streamline, the more that we can centralize those processes to make it easier for our towns to take advantage of the money that they have a right to. There's just, we have a full-time city manager, a full-time finance manager, a full-time assistant city manager. We have administrative assistants. Barre City has the capacity to navigate all of those processes. Many of our smaller and more rural towns just do not. So while I am extremely glad that Barre City has a lobbyist to help us get as much money as we can for our flood recovery, we know this is a statewide problem, so there has to be a statewide solution. So this is meant to be a equity mechanism, if you will, to help more of our towns access the same funding opportunities that Barre City is current, and Montpelier and our other bigger municipalities are working to take advantage of.
All right. Any questions on this one? I think it seems pretty clear. And then you said the other one was forthcoming, the other bill, that was the flood caucus?
Yes, we are currently collecting co-sponsors for the flood omnibus bill, which will probably be introduced. The cutoff is this Friday for co-sponsors, so will be introduced likely next week.
Cool. Well, if there's nothing else, I guess we will let you go and
Cool.
let you head back up to our Ways and Means Committee. How are things up there today?
Good, we'll have Ed Finance fixed by the end of day.
All right.
Just send me a memo with the highlights. please.
Yes, and just don't tell the chair that I said that.
Understood, member.
Thanks all.
Thank you for your time.
Wishful thinking.
If nothing else, he's a conversation. So that's, yeah, obviously this is all precursor to that stuff coming in next. Last year. Just doing this steps every session we're gonna be doing. This emergency response for.
If this were to pass, it'd be interesting to see how what the guidelines are gonna be on as to how the funds are dispersed, especially when there's multiple towns affected.
So, and I think like
The dollar amount on their damage and then percentage,
I mean, that's a lot of the detail that would have to happen for this thing.
Yeah.
To evolve to the point where I think he's in the thing, right? But right now I know that there's just a lot of like frustration, like you're saying, with smaller cities with being able to just understand the path to access them. And there's so many different offices, agencies, how does feeling, you know, blah, blah, blah. So,
yeah, first come, first serve, sorry, you're 10 minutes today, do that all the
well,
time.
that's, you know, that's like the hard part for the smaller, you know, communities, like you said, like they're,
They don't
for
have
a
personnel.
municipality, every city is pretty well staffed
Yeah.
and resourced, so they're able to chase this stuff more fervently than other communities, small like yourself, or
Yeah.
next time, right?
Mhm.
So having a clear path to like just understanding the process to access the. And yeah, we were just coasting through these. Yeah, Autumn, why don't you take us off for a couple of minutes until we get Representative Harrison in